Now we talk about open society and open religion. This analysis would hardly be completed without a word on the neo-language so popular in the ecclesiastical sphere. Traditional Catholic vocabulary has been deliberately modified in order to change the content it expresses. The same has happened in the liturgy and preaching, where the clarity of the Catholic exposition has been replaced by ambiguity and the implicit denial of dogmatic truth. The examples are endless. This phenomenon also goes back to Vatikan II, which sought to develop a Catholic version of the slogan of the world. Nevertheless, I would like to emphasize that all those expressions that are borrowed from secularistic lexicon are also part of the new language. Let us consider the Bergoglio's insistence in the outgoing church, the openness as a positive value. Similarly, I quote from Fratelli Tutti, "A living and dynamic people, a people with a future, is one constantly open to a new synthesis through its ability to welcome differences." Number 160. I quote again, "The church is a home with open doors. We must to be a church that serves, that leaves home and goes forth from its places of worship, go forth from its sacristies, in order to accompany life, to sustain hope, to be the sign of unity, to build bridges, to break down walls, to sow seed of reconciliation." Close the quotation. Similarly, with the open society sought after by Soros' globalist ideology, is so striking as to almost constitute an open religious counterpoint to it. And this open religion is perfectly in tune with the intention of globalism. From the political meeting for a new humanism, blessed by the leaders of the Church, to the participation of the progressive intelligentsia in green propaganda, it all chases after the mainstream thought, in the sad and grotesque attempt to please the world. The stark contrast with the words of the Apostle is clear. I quote from the Epistle to the Galatians, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human being or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." The Catholic Church lives under the gaze of God. She exists for His glory and for the salvation of souls. The anti-church lives under the gaze of the world, pandering to the blasphemous apotheosis of man and the damnation of souls. During the last section of the Second Vatican Ecumenical Council, before the Synod's fathers, these astonishing words of Paul VI resounded in the Vatican Basilica. I quote, "The religion of God who became man, has met the religion, for such it is, of man who make himself God. And what happened? Was there a clash, a battle, a condemnation? There could have been, but there was none. The old story of the Samaritan has been the model of the spirituality of the Council. A feeling of boundless sympathy has permeated the whole of it. The attention of our Council has been absorbed by the discovery of human needs, and these needs grow in proportion to the greatness which the Son of the Earth claimed for himself. But we call upon those who term themselves modern humanists, and who have renounced to the transcendent value of the highest realities, to give the Council credit at least for one quality, and to recognize our own new type of humanism. We too, in fact, we more than any other honor mankind. This sympathy is the figure of the Council and of the new religion, for such it is, of the anti-church, an anti-church born of the unclean union between the church and the world, between the heavenly Jerusalem and the hellish Babylon. Note well, the first time a pontiff mentioned the new humanism was the final session of the Vatican II. And today we find it repeated as a mantra by those who consider it a perfect and coherent expression of the revolutionary men's frame of mind of the Council. Always in view of this communion of intent between the New World Order and the anti-church, we must remember the Global Compact on Education, a project designed by Bergoglio and promoted in collaboration with the United Nations, I quote, to generate a change on a planetary scale, so that education is a creator of brotherhood, peace and justice, an even more urgent need in this time marked with the pandemic. I close and quote. This project has been supported and spread to all educational institutions by the Congregation for Catholic Education through a letter that makes explicit reference to the conciliar constitution Gaudium et Spes. The Global Compact on Education, I quote, is a process of formation in the relationship of culture of encounter, also finds space in the value of common home, with all creatures, people, just as they are formed to the logic of communion and solidarity, are already working to recover serene harmony with creation and to configure the world as a space of true brotherhood. Close the quote. As can be seen, the ideological reference is always and only to Vatican II, because only from that moment on did the anti-church place man in the place of God, the creature in the place of the Creator. The new humanism obviously has an environmental and ecological frame into which are grafted both the encyclical Laudato Si and the green theology. The Church with Amazonian face. On the 2019 Synod of Bishops, with his idolatrous worship of Pachamama in the presence of the Roman Sanhedrin. The Church's attitude during the COVID-19 demonstrated on one hand the hierarchy's submission to the dictates of the state, in violation of the Libertas Ecclesiae, which the Pope should have firmly defended. It also put on display the denial of any supernatural meaning of the pandemic, replacing the righteous wrath of God, offended by the countless sins of humanity and nation, with the more disturbing and destructive fury of nature, offended by the lack of respect for the environment. And I would like to emphasize that attributing a personal identity to nature, almost endowed with intellect and will, is a prelude to her divinization. We have already seen such a prelude of this under the very dome of St. Peter Basilica. The bottom line of this conformity on the part of the anti-church with the dominant ideology of the modern world establishes a real cooperation with powerful representatives of the deep state, starting with those working toward a sustainable economy, involving Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Bill Gates, Jeffrey Sachs, John Elkann, to mention a few. Allow me a brief word about the political situation in the United States on the eve of the presidential election. Fratelli Tutti seems to be a form of Vatican endorsement of the Democratic candidate, in clear opposition to Donald Trump, and a few days after Francis refused to grant an audience to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Rome. This confirms which side the children of light are on and who the children of darkness are. I'm talking now about the ideological foundation of brotherhood. The theme of brotherhood, an obsession for Bergoglio, finds itself first formulation in Nostra Aetate and Dignitatis Humanae. The latest encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, is the manifesto of this Masonic vision in which the cry Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité replaced the gospel for the sake of a unity among men that leaves out God. Note that the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together, signed in Abu Dhabi on February 4, 2019, was proudly defended by Bergoglio with this word, I quote, "From the Catholic point of view, the document did not go 1 millimeter beyond the Second Vatican Council." I close the quote. Cardinal Miguel Ayuso Guizot, President of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, comments in the Civiltà Cattolica, I quote, "The Catholic Church's commitment to interreligious dialogue, which opens the way to peace and fraternity, is part of her religious mission and at its roots in the Council event." I close the quote. Once again, the Council of Vatican II confirms that it is at the origin of Bergoglian metastasis. The fil rouge, the common thread that unites the Council with the cult of the Pachamama, also passed through Assisi, as my brother Athanasius Schneider rightly pointed out in his recent speech. And speaking of the anti-church, Archbishop Fulton Sheen describes the Antichrist, I quote, "Since his religion will be brotherhood without paternity of God, he will deceive even the elect." Close the quote. We seem to see the prophecy of the venerable American Archbishop coming true before our eyes. It is not surprised that the infamous Grand Lodge of Spain, after having warmly congratulated his paladin raised to the throne, once again paid homage to Bergoglio with these words, I quote, "Pope Francis' latest encyclical shows how far the present Catholic Church is from its previous positions. In Fratelli Tutti, the Pope embraced the universal brotherhood, the great principle of modern Freemasonry." Close the quote. The reaction of the Grand Oriente of Italy is not dissimilar. I quote, "These are the principles that Freemasonry has always pursued and gathered for elevation of humanity." Close the quote. I remember that in the Masonic documents of the Alta Vendita since the 19th century, an infiltration of Freemasonry into the Church was planned. I quote, "You too will fish some friends and lead them to the feet of the Apostolic See. You will have preached revolution in tiara and cope, proceeded under the cross and banner, a revolution that will need only little help to set the quarters of the world on fire." I will talk now of the cause and effect. Philosophy teaches us that to a cause always corresponds a certain effect. We have seen that the action carried out during Vatican II have had the desired effect, giving concrete form to that anthropological turning point which today has led to the apostasy of the anti-church and the eclipse of the true Church of Christ. We must therefore understand that if we want to undo the harmless effect we see before us, it is necessary and indispensable to remove the factors that caused them. If this is our goal, it is clear that accepting or even partially accepting those revolutionary principles would make our effort useless and counterproductive. We must therefore be clear about the objectives to be achieved, ordering our action to the goals. But we must all be aware that in this work of restoration, no exception to the principle are possible, precisely because failure to share them would prevent any chance of success. Therefore, let us put aside once and for all the vain distinction concerning the presumed goodness of the Council, the betrayal of the will of the Synod Fathers, the letter and spirit of Vatikan II, the magisterial weight or lack of thereof of its act, and the hermeneutic of continuity versus that of rupture. The anti-church has used the label ecumenical council to give authority and legal force to its revolutionary agenda, just as Bergoglio calls his political manifesto of allegiance to the New World Order an encyclical letter. The cunning of the enemy has isolated the healthy part of the Church, turning between having to recognize the subversive nature of the Council document, thus having to exclude them from magisterial corpus, and having to deny reality by declaring them apodictically orthodox in order to safeguard the infallibility of the magisterium. The dubia represented an humiliation of the princes of the Church, but without untying the doctrinal knots brought to the attention of the Roman pontiffs. Bergoglio does not respond, precisely because he does not want to deny or confirm the implied errors, thus exposing himself to the risk of being declared heretic and losing the papacy. This is the same method used with the Council, where ambiguity and the use of imprecise terminology prevent the condemnation of the error that has been implied. But the jurist knows very well that, in addition to the blatant violation of the law, one can also commit a crime by circumventing it, using it for evil purposes. Contra legem fit, quod infraudem legit fit. The Latin will say, what circumvents the law is against it. To conclude, the only way to win this battle is to go back to doing what the Church has always done, and to stop doing what the anti-Church asks of us today, that which the true Church has always condemned. Let us put our Lord Jesus Christ, King and High Priest, back at the center of the life of the Church, and above that, at the center of the life of our communities, of our families, of ourselves. Let us restore the crown to Our Lady Mary, Most Holy, Queen and Mother of the Church. Let us return to celebrate the traditional Holy Liturgy worthily, and to pray with the words of the saints, not with the rambling of the modernists and heretics. Let us begin again to savor the writings of the fathers of the Church and the mystics, and to throw into the fire the works imbued with modernism and immanent sentimentalism. Let us support with prayers and material help the good priests who remain faithful to the true faith, and withdraw all support from those who have come to terms with the world of its lies. And above all, I ask you in the name of God, let us abandon that sense of inferiority that our adversaries have accustomed us to accept. In the Lord's war, they do not humiliate us. We certainly deserve every humiliation for our sins. No, they humiliate the majesty of God and the bride of the Immaculate Lamb. The truth that we embrace does not come from us, but from God. To let truth be denied, or to accept that it must justify itself before the heresies and errors of the anti-church, is not an act of humility, but of cowardice and pusillanimity. Let us be inspired by the example of the holy Maccabees martyrs before a new Antiochus, who ask us to sacrifice to idols and to abandon the true God. Let us respond with their words, praying to the Lord. So now, O Sovereign of the heavens, send a good agent to spread terror and trembling before us. By the might of your arm, may the blasphemers who come against your holy people be struck down. Let me conclude my talk today with a personal memory. When I was Apostolic Nuncio in Nigeria, I learned about a magnificent popular tradition that came out from the terrible war in Biafra, and which continued to this day. I personally took part in it during a pastoral visit to the Archdiocese of Onitsha, and I was very impressed by it. This tradition, called Block Rosary Children, consists in a gathering of thousands of children, even very young ones, in each village or neighborhood for the recitation of the Holy Rosary, to implore peace. Each child holding a little piece of wood, like a mini altar, with an image of Our Lady and a small candle on it. In the day leading up to November 3rd, I invite everyone to join in a Rosary Crusade, a sort of siege of Jericho, not with 7 trumpets made of ram's horns sounded by priests, but with the Hail Marys of the little ones and the innocents, to bring down the walls of the deep state and of the deep church. Let us join with little ones in the Block Rosary Children, imploring the woman clothed with the sun, that the reign of Our Lady and Mother may be restored, and the eclipse that afflicts us shortened. May God bless this holy intention.